Hi, my name is Lexi Orloff. Just some background on my teaching experience. I am currently a pre-K teacher at Elmcrest Elementary School in Washoe County. In order for my students to be able to be in the pre-K program, they are low income, so that with our program it's 200% below the poverty line. I've been a pre-K teacher for 2 years. I'm going into my third year. Previous to that, I taught kindergarten and first grade. ABAR stands for anti-bias and anti-racist. And as Kleinrock has discussed in the article, Anti-Racist Work in Schools, Are You in it for the long haul? ABR has to be thought of in a proactive way instead of a reactive way. So a lot of the time in schools, administrators or like a whole school district, the superintendents will bring in people after an incident has happened with a student or with a teacher, and they'll hold professional developments, or they'll have different discussions on the incident that's happened and what they're going to do in the future, but it's not always something that is done in a way that's effective, or something that's going to be done that's going to affect the school culture in the long run. And so for me, when it comes to ABR teaching and that culture, I believe that it starts really with the community that you build in your classroom. Because I teach pre-K, I feel like in some ways it's easier for me to build that community. And I don't have as many issues when it comes to my students personally having incidents like that would result in people having to be reactive towards things that are happening in my classroom. But it is difficult because my kids are younger, so it's harder to be proactive in it, because you have to really think of it at like that younger age level. But for me, when it comes to creating community, it starts before school even begins. So we have family orientations, so the students come as well as their parents and anyone else that they want in their family to come. And this is done in a group way. And a lot of it is to fill out paperwork, but it's also to get to know the families. And a lot of the paperwork does address things that are important to them culturally. So we have in there like things about important holidays, important foods, anything that they do or don't want their children to do in regards to their because of their cultural background or religious background. And so through that we also get to know what they know and the different cultures that they have. And so I have used this in the past to bring it up with more of like a student to student level. And so we've had students that have traveled to other countries because they have family members in those other countries. So last year I had a student who traveled to Bangladesh, and so when he came back we talked a lot about like what he did and what he ate and the things that he experienced, and the kids are really interested in that. And in the future, I would really like to have parents be able to come in, especially now that we're having less restrictions with people in the classroom due to COVID. I would really like parents to be able to come in and speak about different things. It could be their culture, it could be presenting different foods to the class, it could be about their careers, so different things to allow the parents to also build that community and that culture in my classroom. So when it comes to using the identity maps in my classroom, I would like to tie that back into the family orientations. So it's difficult with teaching pre-K having my students complete the identity map, because it's not something that they can really do independently and individually. We would kind of have to do that for them. So instead of having them complete it, I think it would be interesting to have their parents kind of complete it with them in a modified way that might not have all of the questions that Kleinrock has in all of her identity maps, but would have questions about like the things that I talked about previously with culture, possibly career, and things more personal to the family as a whole and not just the child. And so I would like to use those identity maps to feed into those things that I would like to have in a year-round basis. So like around the holidays, we like to have the kids learn about and create art that's related to many different holidays, not just Christmas. And so being able to know holidays that are important to them, and if they are around that time of the year, we can talk about them then, if not other times. We also do big career week at my school, so being able to get parents to come in, and that one's in May, to talk about their career. And also I would like to once again incorporate like the cultural aspect, and so creating some kind of week about or month about the different students' cultures, and bringing in like food and traditional clothing and things like that, so the kids are able to learn about everyone in the class, and having the parents excited to share about their background. And I think that would just really build up the community in the classroom, and the kids get really excited when their parents come in, and to be able to share things about themselves. So I think it would be a really successful way to use the identity maps, not just at the beginning of the year, but take that information that we get from the beginning of the year and incorporate it into different lesson plans and things that we go over multiple times during the year. Like I stated before, with teaching pre-K, we don't always have as difficult of conversations as I believe possibly middle school and high school or upper elementary school teachers might have when it comes to racism, sexism, classism, and all of that. And so one of the tools that I would use is calling in, but I would use it in a way which I've used in the past, which is just to teach the kids about different people. And so last year I had a student whose sister was in the strategies program, and she has autism. And so my kids would see her a lot on the playground. She's in first grade, my kids are in pre-K, but they have recess at the time that we're having lunch. And they were always really interested in her, and they'd always say her name, say hi, tell the student in my class like, oh, I saw your sister, and they'd be really excited. But she is nonverbal, and she does a lot of stimming, and so they didn't really understand what was happening there with her. And so our school celebrated like Autism Awareness Month, and it was a focus more of like on a week level, and we had like stickers and everything. But during that week I invited one of the strategies teachers, who was this student's teacher, the student's sister's teacher in strategies, to come into our classroom. And I had previously received a book about let's call it My Brother Charlie, I believe, and it's about a girl whose brother has autism, and how she talks about the things that he can do and the things that he maybe can't do, and how that affects her, but like on a child's level. And so she read that book to my kids, and they were really interested in it. And in that book they talked about like the different ways that students with autism, especially those that are nonverbal, might communicate with each other. And so I found that the calling, and she was able to talk about that with them and taught them a little bit of sign language. So that calling in was really helpful with just being able to build up their understanding of what this student that they're really interested in and kind of saw as like a friend, how they communicated, and be able to build up their knowledge. Another tool that I would use for difficult conversations is referring back to like our classroom expectations. So we have kind of 4 things that we focus on with the pre-K: kind words, listening ears, big voice, and safe hands. And so that's kind of our expectation, and they choose one of those to, like, we call it commitment. So they choose one of those to commit to at the beginning of the day as their focus for the day. And so if something happened where someone said something that was unkind, and so they weren't using kind words, or someone was communicating with them that they were being unkind and they weren't listening, then I would refer back to those commitments that we make every day and the expectations of our classroom. The last tool that I would use for going over a difficult conversation would be just gathering perspective from the student. So understanding what the situation was, where it came from. I talked about in a previous assignment how I had a student who was like saying like, why does a student speak Spanish, and things like that. And so after talking with them, I was understanding more that they and that they didn't want to play with them because they were speaking Spanish. But after talking with them, I was able to understand that it was because they didn't understand what the other student was saying. They didn't feel like they themselves were comfortable speaking with the other student, and so reminding them that we're here to help them, and that my aide speaks Spanish and that I know a little bit, and so if they needed help with the communication, that we're there to help them. So gathering that perspective of like why they may have said what they said or did what they did can really help with the conversation. So multicultural education was first brought up in 1962 due to the Civil Rights Movement. It was brought up due to desegregation in schools, and so the schools were becoming more diverse, and the teachers really had to recognize that diversity and adapt their teaching to it. And due to this, the idea of multicultural education was really brought up. Not that in 1962 that there was necessarily strong multicultural education, but that was really the catalyst for bringing up the idea of multicultural education. Personally, when it comes to my ideas of multicultural courses in college, one criticism that I would have is personally, I didn't have to take more than one multicultural class in college for my education major at UNR, and it was a multicultural literature class, so it was talking about books and diverse books, but it wasn't really talking about anything like anti-racism or anti-bias in the classroom, or any difficult conversations with students or anything like that. And so my real criticism would be that there should be more classes for that, and I know having to take this class now that there is at least one more class that they have to take at UNR when it comes to being an elementary education major. But I believe that more can be done when it comes to that, especially for non-humanities majors. So my brothers are or were engineering majors, and from my understanding of what they did and took, there aren't really anything that's multicultural or diverse that they have to take for that major. And so I think having more classes like that, that's more of a requirement for all majors, more than just education majors or humanities majors, would be beneficial for the colleges and for the community.